welcome. We just want to welcome everybody to Transfer of Power, Gordon Cheung's debut exhibition in Los Angeles, a 10-year retrospective, and an extraordinary exhibition that's been put together over a few years of work. What's it like being in LA?
It's great. Yeah, I mean, I had to come through Mexico to get here, but it's all good.
COVID has changed the world. Let's go and have a look. Come on in. I think one of the first things that really strikes people when they walk in, and I know this is the reason you did it, is the first thing we see when we walk in are these beautiful, very historic Chinese windows. Tell us about the installation.
So, I made these probably over the last 2-3 years, and it's based on a book that I found in a thrift store more than 15 years ago. And they are of traditional Chinese window designs, and to me they represent home, and they were sort of also reflect on China's rapid urbanization, and of course all homes are being demolished in the name of progress. And so there's all these kind of questions to do with what does that mean when such accelerated change is occurring, and to one's identity, to a nation's identity. And so they kind of, windows of course are normally supported by walls, but here they're invisible, suggesting those parts which homes facing in and out.
And we had some really interesting people here. We had 2 nights of previews. One of the things that really resonated with people was just the historic value of these pieces. They're from traditional Chinese architecture. These would have been the designs put in people's homes 1,000 years ago. And I think you mentioned these bamboo, which these aren't bamboo, these are your own medium that you put together, were created because China didn't have glass yet. So this was their way of bringing in air, bringing in the in and the outside, the letting go, the going through.
Right, yeah. So in this case, these windows are actually created from newspaper and bamboo, financial newspaper. So it kind of symbolizes the transition between an old era to a new era, but also between communism to a form of capitalism.
Which takes us perfectly into Forbidden City.
Yeah.
One of the things we've talked about a lot in this project together is how the rapid rise of China in the East, how so many historic homesteads, villages, humble homes are being torn down, but with historic value.
Yeah, so this is an image of Beijing rendered in paint with the Forbidden City in the center. But of course, there's a play on the word Forbidden City as well. And so the home here, or the ruins of a home here, is what's otherwise called a nail house. That's the last property to sell in the development. And quite often that's because they've simply lived in that place for multiple generations, or because they're holding out for more money. But here it symbolizes the individual union of a family home in the name of progress.
Hanging on to culture, hanging on to history, muscle memory, emotion memory.
Yeah, I mean, homes are like temples. Represent temples of memory. They're usually the site of a person's identity. And so, what does a home mean? A home in an individual sense, in terms of your family and so on, but also in terms of the nation state.
Fantastic. So let's talk about. So that's the old, and then we have the referencing the old with this word. So now we're going to talk about more history. More booms and busts of financial markets. We have one of your tulips in isolation here, mounted on Financial Times newspaper again.
Yeah.
And then that takes us into the new print set that has been created for the show. So tell us first about this painting, and then we'll go into Fear and Greed.
Well, this tulip painting is based on the watercolors of during Tulip Mania, which was about 370 years ago. And the Dutch Golden Age at that time is considered to be the birth of modern capitalism, and also the first recorded economic bubble. So that was over the speculation of tulip bulbs, which at the peak sold for the price of a house, which kind of has a nice correlation with these windows that is obviously about home as well. And so the reason why I got interested in that was in response to the 2008 financial crisis. And so there's this sort of absurdity with speculation over a tulip bulb leading to an economic crash.
And we've created, well, I say you have created this extraordinary print set, which comes with blockchain technology. It has augmented reality.
Yeah.
And it has prints. So it's kind of been so multifaceted in this beautiful clamshell. And hidden within the tulips, which is the original boom and bust of the 16th century, we find the founders of digital wallets and Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, so within this portfolio, is so what I'm drawing is this kind of birth of modern capitalism to what I believe to be the next revolution, in blockchain technology. And so I've chosen sort of 4 leaders, if you like, of blockchain, epitomized by Bitcoin, to symbolize this new revolution. So, for example, here we have Satoshi Nakamoto, which is actually who's supposed to be the inventor of Bitcoin, but it's actually a mythology because no one actually really knows who it is.
But somebody has to be the deity of finance.
Yeah.
Somebody has to be the godhead.
I mean, he's actually come out to deny that he did, but the reason for it is because if you invent an alternative monetary system, you paint a target by governments that don't want you to be creating alternative monetary systems.
And just to talk about one more.
This is the inventor of Ethereum. So he's like the second. His blockchain is, or cryptocurrency, is the second most valuable currently, and it's being used to fuel, for example, the boom NFTs right now, non-fungible tokens.
And the way people buy the NFTs is by using their digital wallets. It's not a cash transaction.
Yeah, it's a cryptocurrency sort of transaction, and it can be through other blockchains, but Ethereum is the most popular one right now.
So let's talk about, I didn't show the tulips in the book because we actually have them framed. So let's go through, fair degree, the printed tulips.
Yeah, so these are all taken from the Dutch Golden Age still life paintings from the Rijksmuseum. And what I've done is I've focused individually, onto a single tulip, and I've used an open source algorithm to reorganize non-destructively the pixels. So theoretically, you can put all of these pixels back together into the original segment of that painting.
Did you call this glitch?
Yeah.
When we talked about this, we have other canvases, you have video work, you have an NFT that's coming out soon.
Yeah.
Did you derive the word glitch, or is this?
Oh no, it's a term that's used to describe a sort of technological error.
Okay.
And, but there is a subculture of artists that appreciate the aesthetics of this. Because when we see a glitch, we obviously become aware of the mistake.
Max Headroom.
Max Headroom,
of course.
Yeah. And what my interest in it is kind of like the different layers of mechanical reproduction. So what I mean by that is that the glitch makes you aware of the technology that has created the image, the screen itself, and the fact that it's an electronic image. And these, to me, are fascinating sort of layers that I want to sort of use as a way to encourage a deconstructive sort of reading.
And also, when you say open source, what you're saying is the museum has scanned all of their collection in very high-res format, and made that available for anybody to do with what they will. That's interesting, and generous as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it gives the work new life. It gives the work new meaning when people like yourselves discover these old masters' paintings and find a contemporary way of telling the same story.
Absolutely. What a better way to proliferate, your narrative of history than to actually offer it for use, beyond the museum walls, and just let people sort of have access to it.
And we do have those. They're stunning editions of 20. Now let's talk about one of your most iconic images.
The Bull Rider series came about from symbolizing the market, the stock market, the bear market. And I wanted to find a way to create a hallucinogenic sort of space to symbolize what I feel is our new landscape systems, this sort of data-saturated world, in which, if you imagine trillions...
Is this us riding the bull? Is this us riding the markets?
It could be, or it could be a symbol of the dominant power in the world as well.
But it's also, you know, being here in America and California, it's reminiscent of Richard Prince, who originally took an image similar to this from the original Marlboro Man.
Yeah.
If you think back, it's such an American kind of iconic piece.
Yeah, so
and also the bull represents the markets. The bull is on the...
the bull it's called the bull and the bear market because of the way, mythically, for the way how they attack. The bull will thrust up and the bear will strike down, correlating to the movements of the market. But here, the bull rider is also, you know, a symbol of man and beast.
So I understand the iconography and the theory behind this piece. And let's talk a bit about the materiality. How did you come? How does this sand, this three-dimensional landscape at the bottom? How did you come to that? How does that happen?
I wanted to engage all of the senses. You know, when you see the surface, you know, of this work. So, you know, the viscerality of the surface becomes important because you want to touch it. You know, you want to engage with it beyond, you know, just visual. And so the sand here is used to do that, and I create these moonscape sort of landscapes, and it's a way of creating an alternative world. You know, so that then we come to question this new world that I feel that I'm trying to sort of convey, you know, through these paintings. Because if we imagine, like, you know, trillions moving in an instant, you know, across the world, this capital, movement of capital, wherever it accumulates, creates utopias and dystopias. And it's this that I'm most fascinated by. And if we imagine these kind of, you know, mountains and valleys of movements, that's why I use traditional landscape motifs to describe what I feel is our new worlds, you know, our new worlds of that are created by information. So, for example, you know, the bottom layer of these works is of the newspaper, primarily of the stock listings of the Financial Times. These kind of lists of data, you know, a matrix, if you like, of information. You know, so when we see the painting from a distance, it feels like it's a conventional painting, but then as you move closer and closer, the materiality of it becomes apparent. And so, in a way, the illusion of an image then becomes about the actuality of the paint and the physicality of it through to the symbols of the stock market itself. You know, that these numbers come to represent services, companies, you know, and you know, into this kind of interconnected sort of world. And so the breaking down, if you like, between the illusion and the actual is, for me, also breaking down between, you know, the virtual and the physical. You know, these are the sort of dimensions that we all exist in.
Well, let's go back to the virtual. Let's go back to this glitch. Still life has been one of the sensations of the exhibition so far, and we've had such beautiful feedback from it. Again, it's an old master's painting as such. Distorted, memento mori, falling apart, coming together as such.
Yeah, so, you know, still lives in general, the romantic language of it would be the futility of materialism and the fragility of mortality. But here, this is one of the paintings by Fanton Latour, and one of his paintings was used by the British band New Order for their album Power, Corruption and Lies, which is the title of this work. And so I was interested in using that and referring to that because the type of still lifes that I primarily focus on are from the Dutch Dutch golden age, and they are about an empire through which it accrued its enormous wealth through trade.
And colonization, imperialism, colonialism.
Exactly. And that's the part that is disguised, through
by beauty.
So
by culture.
By suggesting, a new order as a way of revisiting, those narratives, if you like.
Well, let's take the title of Corruption, Lies, and Power, and let's talk about one of the largest pieces we have in the show, which is the Four Horses of the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
And I know from talking to you and from discussing it with other people, this painting came about after the crash in 2008. And these are the companies that were too big to fail. And, which obviously we didn't let fail.
Well, no, actually, these are the ones that actually collapsed.
These were all the collapse, so
Yeah.
this is like Lehman Brothers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was a 2-week period in which, when everything started to crash, there was in the media they were talking about the end of capitalism. There was this palpable fear that the system itself was going to collapse, and nobody knew what that would result in. And so I used a theme, if you like, or a symbol of that, which is the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse is so iconic. It goes back to almost the beginning of time.
Yeah.
It's used in so many different ways through film and books and literature and poetry and painting. What are the Four Horses? Dumb it down for me.
So, at the beginning is conquest, the white horse is conquest, the red is war, black for pestilence, and the pale rider is death.
Because one of the things that Western Europe did when we colonized most of Asia and Africa and Southern Asia and South America was we brought pestilence.
Yes.
To the tribes,
Yeah.
to the indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
Gordon, tell us about the still life and the ram here.
So this still life here is made with. I use paint in an unconventional way. So, for example, I'll paint onto plastic, and then I'll let that dry, and then I'll peel each of those segments off, rearrange them into these forms, and then I'll collage them back on. So, for example, here as well, these kind of marks that I made here, I use a Chinese cleaver, and I'll scoop up different coloured paints, and I'll throw them across plastic. And then once they're dry, I'll collage them on. Here, this one is a drip. This one I use a car spray gun and compressor, and I'll leave it in one position, and I'll keep spraying until it achieves this kind of starburst-like sort of effect. And these are based on Dutch Golden Age still lives, but then I've changed the pot into a Chinese version, because a pot symbolises the world. And down here is this abstract shape. It's actually one of the artificial islands in South China Sea. So I'm kind of drawing timelines between the birth of modern capitalism with the Dutch Golden Age, still life, through to what might be construed as modern day capitalism, what some are saying will be China's century.
And one of the things that's interesting also about your paintings is not just the materiality of paint skills and the new way you found to make traditional paintings as such. A lot of people comment on the very dark shadowing, the cinematic feel to your work.
Yeah, I like the drama of light, and also the ambiguity of it that I deliberately sort of create with the type of palette that I use as well. So it obviously does touch on psychedelia, and this kind of altered state of mind, if you like, in terms of like what the light actually might be. Whether it's a nuclear sunset, a neon vision, or of a unusual sunrise or sunset.
Let's talk about the line dancers. We do have an augmented reality piece in the gallery for people who are able to come. And also you have an app.
Yeah.
So that app, anybody can use anywhere around the world now. They just have to download your app.
That's right.
Is that correct? So we'll share that with everybody. And if anybody has any questions, let us know about the app. It's extraordinary. There's nothing. It's kind of joyful to be able to pop my phone onto the gallery floor and have peonies and flowers growing,
Yeah.
and lion dancers and Bitcoin falling from the ceiling.
Yeah.
So, for those of us who don't come from Asian heritage, what is the significance of the lion dancers for culturally for?
Lion dances are usually used for ceremonies and rituals such as Chinese New Year. And they ward off evil spirits for the new year and wish goodwill, health and prosperity. These are two things right now that are perhaps some of the most important things right now, right? With the pandemic, health, and obviously the economy with prosperity. And really the augmented reality side of the project was something that I developed this year. And it was really in collaboration with A Wong, a Michelin-star restaurant, who's just won a second outside of China. And we wanted to create something with the backdrop of what was occurring with Xi Jinping, to create something that had a positive message, about Asia, about Chinese culture.
And to flip the switch, take the narrative back.
Yeah, to wish goodwill.
Yes, goodwill.
As opposed to
in these larger still lifes, we see again your paintings, but we see them in a much bigger format, much freer. But one of the things I think that really impacts me about these pieces is almost the decay as well. The kind of like, are they at the end of their lifespan? Is the moment gone?
Well, yeah, I mean the beauty of like still lives or flowers, and the relationship between beauty and time is to suggest that these moments, are fragile, and by extension, as our lives, and as a result of that, you come to appreciate, what, the pleasure of beauty and the profoundness of it.
And is this a kind of a mapping underneath the piece?
It is, yeah. This is one of the artificial islands in the South China Sea. And,
that we're hearing so much about on the news today.
Yeah, so 2 years prior to the construction of these artificial islands, Hillary Clinton declared America's Pacific Century in a publication, suggesting that, of course, America had rights.
Hence the title of the piece, Pacific Century.
Exactly. So China's response to that, seeing that they've been surrounded by 400 US military bases, was to create these artificial islands there. Ostensibly, they said that it was for scientific purposes, but over time, there was
rebalance of power.
Well, also the South China Sea is worth something in the region of about $9 to $13 trillion in trade. So to protect that trade route.
But what's interesting with the South China Sea, we hear about China and America, but we forget about Taiwan, Japan, Korea. There are so many different countries that border the South China Sea.
Yeah.
That seem to kind of get forgotten about in those conversations. It seems it's always America, China. It's not. What about the rest of Asia? Where do they sit with this?
Oh well, they are obviously all sort of contesting, the claims, but we have to see also, the wider set of issues. For example, like I just said, China is surrounded by 400 US military bases, war games, spy planes, submarines, missiles pointing towards simulations of war against China, and so on. So these acts of aggressions, may well explain some of the actions that they are taking in response.
Instead of what we're being fed,
Yes.
which is the aggressive is all coming from China.
Yeah.
And all we're doing is positioning ourselves in a position of self-defense.
Yeah, we need to see this through the lens of geopolitics. Otherwise called the Great Game.
Let's talk about something very different. So these three pieces are part of a larger series. I think there are 12 or 16 altogether. Beauty and Isolation, which were a collaboration made with one of our LA art heads here in LA.
Yeah.
Who does extraordinary work, Martin Cliff.
Yeah. He's an old friend of mine that when he used to be based in Britain, but now he's based in LA. And And during the pandemic and lockdown, we decided that this seemed like a perfect time to sort of work on something together. And so what he did was that he approached some people and to ask them during the pandemic and lockdown to take a picture of what they felt was a beautiful landscape. And this is to me like them capturing a moment of like the sublime for themselves.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is during lockdown for us in the UK, and I'm sure everywhere else in the world, our iPhones became our lens for other people.
Yeah.
So I was constantly getting, and I was doing it myself.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
of a sudden, the hedgerows of England were sublime and beautiful, and I had to photograph them.
Yeah.
But it was more about almost like a validation of our daily lives, like taking an image on our walk. It just let us know that we were doing something. There was something happening. There was still life. There was still some focus.
Yeah, and I think also during these sorts of times, it helps it crystallizes what's most important to us as human beings, and so many of my friends say, well, family time.
Well, what is important to you?
To me,
Yes.
personally.
We're here for you. What is important? What is important to you?
Well, of course, family and finding meaning in life, and as an artist, that's something that I want to do. I want to try to bear witness to what I feel are important aspects of my humanity, but also of human history, and to find those profound moments that I can somehow capture into my artworks. And this was a particular project that I guess was a form of collaboration between Martin, but also the people that he helped to invite into producing these images that then I would glitch and reorder in response to these kind of moving histories that we're experiencing. To find personal moments of the sublime that and when you do that, when you experience moments of sheer beauty and so on, it can help crystallize what's most important to you.
And the three we've chosen, I think our show three very, we have Joshua Tree, we have the Sublime Canyon, and then we have a very classic LA sunset. And I think this was actually more in the space as you took a picture of. But how could you not want to walk into these pieces? And again, it's your technology of glitching the work, scanning the piece, depixelating the work.
It goes back to what you were saying. Was a lot of the time during the pandemic, we were communicating through electronic screens. We were teleporting through this electronic space, in order to reach our loved ones. To be entertained, to communicate.
Well, since you brought up entertainment, I want to talk about, for me, the most cinematic piece in the show. So, where to start?
This is, talking about cinema, this is the pre-dawn caveman that you see there is actually from Stanley Kubrick's 2001. And it's the moment in which...
Is that man inventing a tool, inventing his first weapon?
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's touched this alien sort of monolith, and there's this implied transmission of knowledge of some sort. And somehow, pre-dawn, man has either sort of evolved into a so-called higher form of intelligence, and understood that if you wield a bone as a weapon and murder, the other pre-dawn tribe, you will secure the pool of life. And in the moment of triumph of having achieved that, and having thrown the bone into there, and as it's cinematically rotating through space, it iconically sort of cuts to a rotating space station. And what Kubrick seems to be suggesting is that the evolution of civilization from pre-dawn man to space age man is intertwined with violence.
And again, we have us riding the market, riding the bull, riding the power. But one of the questions I've been asked a lot are these kind of ghostly figures that kind of line the canyons into this very kind of curated, orchestrated space that you created of light and depth and darkness all at the same time.
Yeah.
So what are these figures? What are these figures, and why are they here?
The first time they started to appear was in response to George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq, and it was this manufacturing of contemporary fear.
Boogeyman.
Yes. So it's actually it goes from Scooby-Doo that I use. So it's kind of like this cartoon fear, but it's the convenient weapon of politics in order to create consensus to be able to.
You know, when I was younger, for us, going to school in America at one time, I remember hiding under desks because of the fear of Russia and the Cold War.
Right.
And we were constantly being reminded of this outside power that had to be contained and pushed back against.
Yeah.
Of course, which never happened.
Right. Yeah, and you have films that propagate this as well, especially through science fiction.
So that's one of the, I think, the most important things that we've been able to create with this show is your collaboration with Shepard Fairey.
Which has been great because it was such a short timeline to be able to create this, but we both felt that it was such an important issue to address with this opportunity that came about.
So let me just explain it for everybody really quickly, and then and this is working with you is such a learning process for me, and I really appreciate that because it's really expanded my knowledge of what I didn't know about all societies, but very much about Asian society in America and broader for me. And that's the joy of working globally with international artists that have different perspectives and come from different diasporas, is we all get to learn from each other. We get to build those bridges. But this piece, I just want to say one of the things we've done is, because it's Scarry in this show, is we partnered with ICFAC, which is an international federation of artists and art heads and art makers and creators, and that are pushing back against the rise of Asian hate. And I think what Inez is doing with ICFAC is incredible.
Yeah.
To kind of, with her dim sum dialogues, with giving voice to the unvoiced and the unheard.
Yeah.
At this time when we are really seeing a rise in racism against people that look a certain way.
Yeah, no, it's an extraordinary achievement because it was recently sort of restarted as a non-profit organisation, the International Council for Fine Art, and it has also helped to inspire other organisations to form as well. So, that's how important this particular moment is in respect to Stop Asian Hate.
So Vincent Chen. Vincent Chen was a young draftsman living in Detroit.
He was about to be married, and unfortunately, two, I believe, Detroit automobile workers decided to murder Vincent, accusing him because of the Japanese automobile companies dominating, of having taken their jobs away. And
so once again, from a Western perspective, seeing all people of Asian descent as one, instead of being able to identify Korean, Chinese, Indonesian, Malaysian,
there's different layers of racism.
They're very much so. I think when we reached out to Shepard and his team at Obey about doing this, we just knew that he was the right person with the right voice to collaborate with you on this piece.
Yeah.
And the way that the two of you have gone back and forth with this multi-layered process has created something that's truly an honor to Vincent Chen and to his foundation. And to have the foundation's permission and have them support this, was an honor for us. This print, all the money from its sales are going to ICFAC, and what ICFAC are doing are creating a scholarship fund to help further educate those who are interested in becoming activists, social activists.
Yeah, or community leaders or people that will help with social justice. Because Vincent Chin's murder, unfortunately, the judicial system failed to find justice, and but it galvanized the people into fighting and protesting, so that then it achieved Asian American civil rights.
This is one of the video pieces we have on the show. The only video piece actually we have on the show of this exhibition, but not your only video piece you've ever created. So it has this wonderful momentum mori kind of decay, destruction a moment of beauty, a moment of loss.
Yeah, I call it the effect of the digital sands of time, and it's from the open source algorithm that I use to glitch most of the works that use that technology. And it used to be when I first got it, I would punch in the numbers, and it took such a long time that after 2 years I came to realize I had a friend who works at Google X, and I asked him, and I said, hey, can you create an interface that would help me do this easier? And over the weekend he produced something for me that enabled me to do that, including the ability to be able to string together around 3,000 to 4,000 glitched images into animated form.
Wow, I didn't realize there were so many.
And you see here that they're slowly sort of like shifting in and out.
So in work, process, and time, how long would it take you to create these things?
It's hard to quantify.
Weeks and months, or days?
It would have been used to be, but not anymore. It's now a faster process to be able to create something.
We have, I think your Rise and Fall of Empire series speaks really well with this piece.
Yeah, it's from originally from Thomas Cole's The Course of Empire, and it's 5 paintings that depict the rise and fall of a fictional empire. So from the savage through to the Arcadian that you see here, to consummation, destruction, and finally desolation. And I guess in the context of this exhibition, there's a lot of talk about the decline of the American empire and the rise of China.
This is one of my favorite pieces in the show, and I just think it has this kind of sublime peacefulness to it. But under that sublime peacefulness, there's a big political story. So, Towers of Water is what this painting is called. It's one of our largest landscapes in this exhibition. It's multi-layered, multimedia, stunning. The light and the presence in this piece. It's been fun watching people just standing there for long periods of time and absorbing this piece. But, tell us, I know these are river systems, but tell us what this painting is and what it represents for us.
Well, the Himalayan mountains are otherwise called the Towers of Water because they fuel the main rivers of China and many others actually. And so here you have the river systems from the Himalayan mountains, and in the corner you can see a lightning that is a reflection of the river systems themselves. And that's because they're being dammed right now for hydroelectricity. And there are twin reasons for this. Obviously the power of civilization, but also you can therefore then have political leverage over all of the nations that rely on the river systems downstream.
Well, one country dams, then they charge the next country. They have power and control. They create a dam. They decide where the water goes next.
Yeah.
When really, the water that comes from the Himalayas should be everybody's.
Yeah, it should be.
Should water be a source? Should water be an economy? Should air be an economy?
Well, as I say,
the ground we walk on.
Yeah, it's the source of life, right? So it's So you're not gonna mess around too much with the person that's in control of the water, which is why Tibet becomes such an important sort of area as well, because
it's the taps.
Yeah, and also for China, if a foreign power takes over, it will mean that foreign power has control over China.
Okay. Let's talk about the arteries. This series, I think, it's been one of the most successful that we've launched here in LA. And we had 9 of these altogether. And now, as we can see, they're all gone. They've all found their way to their homes. But I just think that one of the pieces, I was talking about this with somebody, and I think one of the things that's interesting, you and I had this conversation, you have this beautiful landscape, but the other thing you have here is, we know porcelain was created in China.
Yeah.
And then the Dutch colonized and took porcelain back to Holland, where they created the blue Delft.
Yeah.
And then they went back to China, and then the Chinese mass-produced Delft with Chinese motifs to sell back to Western European markets.
Yeah.
And when you think, we're talking about the 17th century, how far globalization really goes back, and I think it's really interesting the pots you've chosen for these pieces as well.
Yeah, so I changed, they're all based on Dutch still life paintings, but yes, I changed the pots to Chinese ones, the pot symbolizing a world, if you like. And so it was my way of sort of suggesting, the Dutch still lives, representing, birth of modern capitalism, or the Dutch golden age rather, through to what may well be, a new order.
A new world order, a daily new world order. I think, we dragged into this, incredibly beautiful, multi-layered again, multimedia. One of the things I love about this piece is the spirits. I've seen dragon dances. I've been to Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
I've been to it in Hong Kong and London, and go to Chinatowns. The kind of places that we created.
Yeah.
Chinese migrants over the years. And what I love about what you've done with these is they seem more like spirits and less human in a sense.
Yeah, they're kind of trying to push the worlds that I sort of depict into more sort of spiritual dimensions. These kind of hallucinatory sort of worlds, these sort of altered states of mind. So that then we do look at things from a different perspective.
So when you create a piece like this, when you're, how do you start with such a large painting? Like, where do you start? What's the beginning for you? Show us how that happens.
Well, they actually all start on the computer first. So what I call my virtual palette, which is a collection of all sorts of images that I find on Google, and I collate, for example, subcategories of like trees, mountains, even like water and so on. And then I have an idea in my head, and I piece these together. I start photo collaging them into Photoshop, and then I pre-prepare these newspapers with the stock listings of the Financial Times, and I coat it in a special inkjet varnish that then allows me to print onto. And
print is a bit like analog now. It's kind of like an old school medium.
Yeah.
But where are you collecting all these Financial Times newspapers?
I subscribe to. So I get them every day.
Okay.
And then I jigsaw them back together on the canvas or linen, and I'll mask areas out, spray paint onto them, squeeze paint on icing bags.
And here again we have the air gun effect at the top with the drips.
Yeah, so it's all sorts of different processes and techniques that I use to, overlay and then interwoven within that is narratives of subjects.
So these spirits are walking on water in a sense.
Yeah.
In a surreal way, I suppose. I just realized because it feels very much like a reflection of water around this space. We have one more of your Empire pieces behind us.
Yep, that's the destruction of the 5 paintings by Thomas Cole. It's fictionally describing, the rise and the fall of.
I remember seeing many years ago, because I came to watching houses before this, and I remember seeing kind of a very decorative, highly gaudy Roman classical prints of parades of conquest Caesar coming back. And there was this market at one time in the art market for these like historic pieces that never existed.
Yeah.
Like these fantasy of empire, the romance of empire.
It's the romance of greatness.
The romance of war, the romance of conquest.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is the interesting spin on it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a romance of power. So, but of course, Rome or the romance of Rome is what the West often aspires to as being a cradle, of a great civilization.
Or Alexander's lust and desire for more land, more people, more culture.
Yeah.
At the same time, running away from what he'd just conquested. It was a constant movement of going and getting.
Right.
In that kind of that creation of empire. So we talked about the line dance, so we have another beautiful still life here. What is the name of this piece?
Rebalance to Asia, which is these terms that were used by the Obama administration to describe their foreign policy of surrounding China.
And again, we have one of the man-made islands in the South China Sea as the base of the piece.
Yeah, it was. They otherwise call it the containment of China,
which I have to openly admit I didn't know until today.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're having this conversation. There's so much. I mean, this is the thing about your work. I mean, I've been in this process with you for a couple of years. We're friends, obviously, as well, and we talk about work and materiality and stuff. There's so much depth and research to every piece that you do, and I think that's incredible. Like there's like the authenticity, but also you have this desire of narrative and storytelling to really get the facts right.
Yeah, because
I think that's important.
My education in Britain didn't involve that much to do with China. So to me, I remember thinking that China was this like tiny little country or something, because everything was all about the World War and the British Empire and so on. And it was only much later on in my life that I come to understand, that there's this entire history that's incredibly important to my own identity, that I need to address.
Which has been whitewashed, really.
Yeah, and at the same time was like 1997 was the handover of Hong Kong, which is where my parents come from. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't even know what colony was at the time. And of course, it was a British colony at the time. And as it had got handed back to China, it sparked my interest in sort of like finally discovering those histories. And that kind of maybe moves on to this thing, which is the string of pearls. And what you see here is a trade map, of the proposed maritime Silk Road of China, the new, as part of the Belt and Road initiative that China is undergoing, which is currently, I believe, has about 170, countries involved in their trade agreements for this. One of the biggest human projects in history. In the corner at the bottom, you see a boat. That's called Nemesis, which was the gunboat that was used by the British to attack China in order to force them to consume opium, to buy opium under the behest of the East India Trade Company. And
because it was a massive market, they wanted an addicted market.
Yeah,
as a revenue.
China didn't want anything. From the West. Their products were not very desirable by either Chinese. But what they wanted was silver. And so they exchanged their silver for tea, silk, so when their silver supplies, treasuries started depleting, silver was, I believe, used as a currency for mercenaries in the war. They happily went to attack China in order to sell them opium and force them to open up and to then have their docks and certain cities along the coastlines occupied.
But what's beautiful about this piece, and when you come close to this painting, you have the texture of the collaging and the painting and the mediums. There's almost through this landscape, this mountainous landscape above this haze of light, it's almost like this like a mother of pearl pearlescent. Yeah. And I know the painting is, I'm sorry to be so literal, but was that a conscious choice with the title of the painting being String of Pearls?
Well, String of Pearls is actually a military contractor's term, and to describe this trade route, this proposed trade route that China is undergoing. But yeah, the mountain is here also looking like a looping wave as well. It's a holy mountain, one of China's holy mountains as well.
And what is this iridescent light here? What does this represent for us?
Oh, it's just this ambiguous light of beauty. So quite often what I normally do in a landscape painting is that I'll have a sort of human scale motif, whether that's a home or in this instance a ship, and then a harnessing of the landscape to power civilization, and then a physical holy mountain or holy landscape through to a divine order. So a mountain will represent a bridge between earth and heaven. And that's why a lot of mythologies have their deities sort of existing on top of those places. And so system through which we use in order to create and build.
Come stand this way, Gordon. Thank you. Thank you to ICFAC for making us part of this project with you. It's a huge thank you to Joel and Bianca Chen, who've been hugely supportive here in LA for us. The space is gorgeous, and we're grateful to be here and have them supporting this project. But most importantly, thank you for creating this and giving us this knowledge and letting us in. I think that's one of the most important things an artist can do is let us in. And I think you've done that really beautifully.
Well, thank you.
Are there any questions? We're here to answer anything. I know we have, we're here from Bali, Chicago, London, Bristol. So if there's anybody that has any questions from afar, I'm sure Gordon's happy to answer. And if you're in LA, come see the show, folks. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see this in an exhibition of this scale.
Send over any questions you have.